Hello, beautiful humans. Welcome back to another episode of Naked Sunday. I am your host, Caleb Bells, and I have my new friend, Carlee Myers, on the program. Every time I say program, I feel like I'm talking to like an 80, 90-year-old grandma being like, I'm watching my programs, son. You know? Carlee, thank you for joining me. Thanks for
Yeah,
joining me on the show today.
thanks for having me. Thanks for having me. I feel like we're on an episode of like 60 Minutes or something, you know. Welcome to our next program. We'll see you on our next program.
That if I could get a sick like intro like that, I wonder if I could do spoofs of the intros of like all different type. Oh, that's actually that made me think about like the who's the guy who did the dumb Starbucks? Did you ever see that?
No, I don't think so.
Oh my God. Is it I don't think it's Dimitri Martin. It's a different guy. He had a whole nother show. I think it's on HBO. The most like uncomfortable humor you'll ever witness, but this guy is brilliant. I can't, he did this one show where he invented dumb Starbucks and that went massively viral. And then he does this other show where he just, I can't, I'm gonna find it because now I'm really upset. Now I can't think of the name and it's really, really funny. Anyway,
You have to add it to the
thanks.
show notes later. You're like, this is what I was talking about. I finally figured it out.
Yeah. I'm so upset. I'll talk to my buddy Ian. He remembers. He'll know exactly which one I'm talking about. But
Oh, wait, I'm sorry. Program notes. Program
program
notes.
notes. We're gonna make that a thing. We're gonna make that a thing again. Bringing programs back. There we go. Let's, well, we met each other the other day, and I don't know if you've listened to any of the episodes of the podcast, but I'd like to start all my episodes with why I appreciate my guests. The fact that we're rolling with some humor. If people can't laugh, what are we doing in this lifetime?
Mm.
That bothers me. That bothers me. But here we are. We barely know each other from like one little chit chat, but of course we were connected through somebody who's fantastic. So, like attracts like kind of idea. But even just in our first conversation, you just you're just so authentic. You're just real. You're just curious. You're fun. Anybody, and naturally people get into these kinds of fields that we are in. There's a certain kind of like, I'm just curious. I'm so open. I want to be real. And we start to get tired of the BS that especially networking and all that gets into. That bothers me. That just bothers me.
Mm.
And you were just ready to go there and be real with me and have a good time. Of course, I'm here excited to just hang out with you again and continue building a friendship with you. So, Carlee, it's my long way of saying thank you for being you.
Yeah, thank you for thanking me for being me. I appreciate it. I appreciate being seen for who I am, and I appreciate you being a space holder in that sense. I was just right before this on a training, and we were talking about psychological safety, right? So I appreciate you being that beacon of psychological safety, so that I feel safe enough to be me. Flip it back
Oh,
on you.
that felt very meta right there.
Yeah. Oh
Like,
yeah. We're
we're
gonna get crazy.
it's gonna get weird. It's gonna get real weird. We're gonna lean into that. I want to come back to that in a second, but before we get into that, let's do this. You know yourself better than I, so share with the audience, Carlee, who are you?
Oh, I'm in a humorous mood today. So for the audience who doesn't know our backstory, when we first met a couple of days ago, he asked the exact same question. He said, "Who are you?" And I laughed to myself. And I wish what I would have said is just, "I am." Like talk about getting existential. Who am I? I am. Not all the labels, not all the, yeah, sure, I own a business, I'm a daughter, I'm this, that, and this, but am I really? No, those are the stories. I am. But since we're expecting labels, I'll share a little bit about what folks are probably expecting. Yeah, I'm Carlee Myers. I own a company called the Stress Less Company, and I've been helping people for the last, I don't know, 7.5 years reduce their stress and enhance their relationships using tools like the Stress Less method and safe conversations.
I just love that response. It was very on brand. We're already getting some more giggles out of it. I do remember when you said that a couple days ago, and we got to get existential. What would we be doing on a naked Sunday without being existential in some way, shape, or form? Let's lean into this psychological safety thing because that really, I've been thinking quite a bit about this, and I was just editing a podcast yesterday where I dove a little bit into just, like, one of my statements was around people feeling safe enough to be themselves. Go into that, especially like I think it's cool. You just learned some stuff. So like I've learned the best way for me to learn is to just go teach it right away. So let's lean into that.
Yeah, well, you're just calling me out. I gotta take it from here. Yeah, so I'm actually in the process of taking a deeper step into learning a little bit more about safe conversations. I'm already as certified as I possibly can be, but they're running a beta and I'm helping them out. But today we talked about psychological safety, which I'm sure many of your listeners have heard of before. And it has kind of has like a lot, it's sort of like a loaded word, I feel like, in our culture at this point. Where a lot of folks think that psychological safety means that we can't express our grievances. That like it can almost be synonymous for some, not everyone, but for some with like this idea of toxic positivity. And that is not what we'll start off with. That is not what psychological safety is. Psychological safety is about creating an environment between people, whether it's one person with one person or one to many or many to one, right? Doesn't matter the numbers, but it's about creating safety. So, one of the things that is foundational in safe conversations is this concept of zero negativity. And negativity is really like anything that could be experienced as a put down. So it could be words, a tone of voice, eye roll, body language, whatever. And psychological safety is about taking that stuff out, taking out the threats as much as we can, the feeling of being threatened, the anxiety, the disconnection, and infusing our relationships with the good stuff. Right. So you were saying like if we're not laughing, what are we doing? Right. Like that's some of the good stuff. Existentialism, it could be some of the good stuff, depends on which side of the coin you're on, right? Um, but yeah, I would say psychological safety is about at the end of the day feeling safe to be who you are or creating safety for someone else to show up as who they are without the worry that someone's going to try to change us or without the anxiety of trying to change someone else.
Hmm. What drew you to this work?
Mm. Well, this is the can of worms, right?
Hmm.
For so many of us business owners, especially in the personal development space. I'll give a trigger warning before I share my story, actually, but believe it or not, probably believable that my motivation really started off from an experience I had when I was about 12 years old.
Hmm.
Yeah. So a man was actually murdered in my home. My mom was shot 3 times. And while my mom ended up making a miraculous recovery, I'll spare you the details, trust that it was miraculous. I ended up struggling for a long time. You know, I struggled with the symptoms of PTSD, with stress, with night terrors, jumpiness. I mean, you name it. I was probably struggling with it. And one of the pieces of my journey, so I started the Stress Less company because um, there were so many tools out there, mainstream, if you will, therapy, meditation, yoga, change your diet, hit the gym, all really phenomenal tools, all really have helped me in my journey. But none of them were getting me where I wanted to go. And so I kept exploring. I needed to find that deeper level, the thing that uniquely worked for me, more like the things that uniquely worked for me, and the magic recipe for me. And so I kept exploring, finally figured out what worked for me to feel more content, more at peace. And that's when I ended up starting the Stress Less company, because I realized nobody's really talking about this. We all know that there's no one size fits all, and yet we're all trying to fit, the one size fits all into our mental health and our lives. So that's one side of the coin. The other side of the coin is I realized the power relationships have on our mental health. And one of the things that I learned from way back when going through that experience is that some people are really great at creating that psychological safety. And some they're trying their best, but they just don't know how. And that goes for me too. Sometimes I'm A game. Other times I have no idea what to say. And so for me, it was finally opening up after a long time of keeping quiet about what was going on with my mental health and then not being received. Right. So not only was I experiencing the pain of that trauma, but then the compounding of that pain of going to someone and getting unsolicited advice, or going to someone and them saying, "What do you mean? Why aren't you over this by now?" Or going to someone and them saying, "Oh, I know exactly how you feel." I'm like, "Really? Do you know how I how I feel? Was your mom's boyfriend killed and your mom shot 3 times? Like, I don't think you understand." Right. And so I learned through frustration and through life experience that the people that were really there for me, they helped me heal tenfold. And those that they wanted to be there for me, but they just didn't know how, it created more suffering. And so there's that one side of the coin, which is like, hey, I got to learn the tools to help me cope within myself, have my own internal experience of peace. But also let's learn the tools so I can ask for what I need, but also so that I can support other people when they're going through a tough time. And my automatic response, my natural genetic response is to say, I don't know. I don't know what to do here. I'm just trying my best.
Damn.
Can of worms, I told you.
I mean, I like a can of worms with this. Like, I have yet to find an interesting person who doesn't have a pretty heavy story,
Hmm.
like an origin story situation. It's unfortunate in some obviously in many ways, that painful, dark stuff. It wasn't long ago that I was introduced to the word a crucible, where you go through that dark moment in your life, but it's what helps you emerge more as what, like, kind of the butterfly comes out of the cocoon, that situation where it's almost this necessary struggle, and everybody's is different. Obviously, one would hope we could do that without people being murdered. Like, that'd be really nice. Sadly,
Be
those are the
great.
things.
Yeah.
It'd be really great. But it's so interesting. That's what gives rise to people like yourself, who then go on a journey to go find the tools through their own struggles, through their own pains, to then somehow package it all in a way that actually makes sense
Yeah.
for other people who don't know who are going through the same struggles, who feel lost, who don't necessarily have the same resolve or internal strength or drive or whatever intangibles that you're just kind of like God-given talents. It's so interesting to see that's that story arc. Interesting people have that story arc every single time.
Mm.
I've yet to meet a interesting person who doesn't have it. And the people who are born, they've never really people that are boring have never really been challenged. They haven't been called to like look within themselves, or they just avoided it altogether. So I really
Mm.
wanted to commend you on, like, you didn't have to try to go figure that out,
Mm.
but you chose to. And
Yeah.
it's so cool that you're taking that and then pouring it back into other people so that they can facilitate their own,
Yeah.
their own
I mean,
self-growth.
is not suffering the best motivator for change, right? Like, I think for me, I was in so much pain, psychological pain, that I felt there was no other, I was going to have to figure this out. I was going to have to find the tools, get the resources. And I think my clients are no different in that way, in that there's pain, there's suffering, and they know there's another way possible because they've seen other people doing things differently. Um, but yeah, it's interesting to think about. Now, the whole point of the stress less company is to shorten the journey. And it took me, like, I don't know, 10, 12, 15 years of exploring before I finally figured it out, piecing little piece with little piece, little piece, little piece. That's what I hope to accomplish, is to say, okay, it took me 12 years, it'll take you 12 months. It'll take you even less to learn the tools, but to implement it's a whole nother thing.
Mm.
It is a lifelong journey, but I'd rather be implementing throughout my life tools that are making a difference than researching tools that aren't, right? So
Do you find that you have a lot of people that come from as extreme of an experience like that? Is that I always feel like I had somebody once tell me dirt finds their own level, and it resonates. I think I've told you I grew up in a cult, and so like
Hmm.
I start talking to people, and out of nowhere, I was like, "Well, I kind of grew up in something like that," and it started to just like almost magnify. It's almost like they'd almost even find a way for it to be more of the same thing. Did you
Yeah.
find that a lot of people have had? I mean, that's a very tragic, traumatic loss
Yeah.
in that way. Like,
Yeah. It's funny, because I have people that come to me who've had really, really challenging experiences. Um, in fact, I'd say most people are coming to me because they're in the midst of or experiencing the aftermath of an incredibly challenging experience. Are all of my clients um, domestic violence witnesses or survivors? No. Are they all gun violence witnesses or survivors? No. But what I can say about my clients is that they know what it's like, and my specialty in relationships, right? They know what it's like to go through a really challenging time in their life and to feel the expounding, the the compounding of pain because their relationships aren't as connected as they, quite frankly, need them to be.
now I'm assuming that's not even just relational at home. I'm talking probably like work and everything, like everybody's arm's distance.
Hmm.
I see that. Like we're in this world now where we talk a lot. I just got off a call a little while ago about vulnerability. That's been the theme of the past 2 weeks in my life around here. How can I be vulnerable enough to be myself around people? And it's interesting to see like something as more physical based also turns it into, well, emotionally, I keep all my cards too close to my chest and I don't let anybody else in. That you just start missing out on life.
Mm.
Is that kind of the point you start seeing people out there? Maybe they're not engaged in their romantic relationships, or is it work? Like where do you see that's typically kind of showing up first?
I think most folks that I talk to, it's not that they're not engaged. They're in. They're engaged. Most people that I talk to, it's that they feel like they're trying everything that they can to reconnect and it's not working. Um, I'll give you an example. I have a former client actually now, who is married to an active alcoholic. Now, she's doing everything she can to have connection in that relationship. What happens when he falls off the wagon? Times can get real tough, right? And so a lot of folks that come to me, or I'll give you another example, another former client who she went through a nasty divorce. She didn't come to me about that relationship at all. She actually came to me about the relationship with her adult daughter, who that relationship was damaged during that really challenging time in her life, right? Or another woman who has elderly, aging parents. And it's again not about the relationship with the parents, but it's actually about the relationship she has with her sister and how to navigate taking care of the parents, right? And so there's this common theme of like, yeah, we're going through it. And there's this other party that, like, for whatever reason, we are just not on the same page. And how I'm in. I think that they're in. I'm not fully convinced that they are in. And how do I navigate this? Because I don't want to lose this person, this connection, this relationship. And it could go even further. My home, right? My life savings, there's a lot attached to our relationships, unfortunately, whether we like it or not.
Well, that made me think of is the kind of the classic line of where you think it is, it ain't. That I guess is where my curiosity around this comes from, is that on the surface, things present one way, but the real problem that we discover along it wasn't actually the problem you thought it was.
Hmm.
I'll use money as an example. A lot of times people think it's I can't make more money or can't lose the weight. but the problem is actually somewhere else, because you do actually know how to do it. You know how to make them more money, you know how to organize things, you know how to lose the weight, but it's this other place that you're not addressing in your life, you're talking
Mhm.
about right now. You don't feel safe in some other place, which is the real linchpin. And then you have to actually dig a little deeper as to, well, why is that really going on there in the
Yeah.
first place?
Yeah. Great example. I had a client years ago who was in just buried in debt. And you would think, like, if you had the conversation with this person that, well, there's a money problem. Why are they working with, stress less? Why are they working with a stress less company other than like they're stressed about money? They should be working on these financial goals and paying off debt and working 3 jobs and whatever they got to do to make ends meet. But if you look underneath of that, it wasn't really, yes, the debt was a problem, but what was really at the root of it was that this person, their marriage they didn't trust each other. There wasn't psychological safety to be able to communicate about challenging things. And so what happened between this couple, because they didn't trust each other, they'd get paid, they'd hide their money from each other. They get paid, they hide their money. Well, who was paying the bills? The credit cards, the loans, right? And so it wasn't about the debt. It was about the fact that there wasn't trust, that there was fear in both parties of this marriage. And so what resulted is that that money didn't go to where it needed to go. That's just one small example where you would think it's one thing, but it boils down to something completely, I want to say completely different, but something ever related.
I want to stay on that one for a second, because the more I do this work, and I'm sure the same with you, people just, as you're saying, people open up their life, which sometimes is bizarre when you're like, I'm somebody that is not, I don't live in the same space as you,
Mm,
but they might be sharing stuff that they've never told anybody,
mm-hmm.
when logistically it doesn't seem like it would be that way. Like this is the way, which is a profound gift in and of itself. Like is one of my most cherished things within this role. But I think what you just said there, especially about money,
Mm-hmm.
the things we do because of the guilt, the fear, the shame, we start hiding these other behaviors. And that's the actual root of the problem. It's not and it often is very intelligent people, but there's
Yeah.
that fear of like opening up and saying, this is what's going on. I don't know how we're going to navigate this together, even though we're in this relationship. That's
Yeah. Yeah. Well, it's wild. It's wild, because what really needed, like in that couple's example, was that there had become the connection had been ruptured massively. There had been so much disconnection that both parties were so afraid that the other person was going to leave them at any moment, right? That they were like squirrels preparing for winter, right? They didn't want the relationship to end, but they were so terrified that the other person was going to leave that they were like, I have no choice. And so what actually needed to happen was that a conversation needed to happen, which is like, look, I want this relationship to work, but I am scared shitless. Pardon my French.
you can swear all you need here.
Great. Love it. Love it. Um, and when we enable ourselves to have the conversations that need to happen, quite frankly, then things can really change. And that's one of the reasons why I ended up getting certified in safe conversations, because these conversations have the ability to completely change the trajectory of our lives for better or for worse.
What was the big turning point for you in your path? Was it somebody who came in? Was it like, what was it that like really shifted your trajectory and feeling more whole and more open again?
I think I understand your question. I'm gonna go based on what I'm receiving, and then you tell me if I'm on point or not, or ask a clarifying question.
You could take it any way you need to, and
All right,
I'll go down the rabbit hole every direction you need to.
here we go. Brace yourselves. No, one of the tools that I ended up learning earlier on in my journey, let's say 5 or 10 years, probably 5 years into my journey of uncovering and discovering, was the power of creativity in my world as a tool.
Hmm.
And so this is the side of the coin where I'm talking about managing our own internal experience. Um, one of the biggest shifts that showed me there was hope, right? Because the opposite of depression is hope. Was my relationship with art. For a long time after my mom was shot, I struggled, like I said, with night terrors and just anxiety and whatnot. And I felt like the best way I could describe it is like my thoughts and my nightmares were almost like frustrated, agitated bees, like swarming my head, right? Like I'm like, they're just swarming. And they were agitated, so I became agitated, and then it was just off to the races we went. I'm like flailing through a garden wherever I'm at. And when I discovered creativity, creating art specifically, that was the first time in a long time that I felt like the bees sort of had a hive. The thoughts had a place to go. They had a place separate from me where I could look at them and say, huh, I see you. They weren't, they were still agitated. They were still pissed off, but they were separate from me for the first time in a way that I could get perspective. So that's sort of the first kind of door opening to the idea that there's a different way of doing things. Um, that there's hope, that if I could experience a little bit of progress here, then I could experience a little bit of progress there and there and there and there.
The creative spark seems to be this universal thing that ultimately comes out. How am I going to say this? I've talked a lot about the balancing the masculine and the feminine a lot lately. So what you shared there was, it was interesting to me. That creative spark to me is often that feminine, flowy, creative
Mm-hmm.
energy that starts to come out. But the interesting side of that is that the masculine, this cold, rigid structure, provides a different type of safety. It's almost like the scaffolding of a home, of the house, I should
Mm-hmm.
say.
Mm-hmm.
But it's that creative element, that warmth, that like the paintings on the wall and the whatever, all that stuff makes it feel home. As you said, now there's a place for these little buzzing bees to come home to, and I
Mm-hmm.
can channel that in an interesting way. I just find it interesting that it seems to me that it follows that process. I need to first put up enough of these structures, the tactics, the tools. I need to feel strong enough in my body. I need to feel smart enough in my skill sets. But then eventually I need to let that flow. I need to stop being so
Mm-hmm.
rigid. I need to find a way to just let that outlet pour out of me. And it ultimately comes out in something that doesn't necessarily, it's not about a structured thing. It's about just here's a free expression of who I am, whether it's in painting or writing or name your vehicle. It seems to be this constant thing. I've found my release in blank.
Yeah.
Maybe it is. Yeah, I thought that was just,
Yeah, no, I think this is really like it was the first piece of the puzzle. And so much so that I ended up going to school for art. I wrote my thesis as art on the subject of art making as a meditative practice. And like, I was
wow.
like, art's going to save the world. Like, let's go. But I realized after doing all of that, that it was one piece of the puzzle and that emotions, right? You probably heard this. It's pretty popular saying emotions are energy in motion. Right. And so like, for me, it was about finding the right structure for me at the time, and it can be ever changing, right? To release the emotions and the thoughts and the feelings. So, like at that time, it was creating art. And another time it was dancing. At another time it was going to therapy every week and chatting for the whole session I'm trying to go over, right? Like for other times in my life, it was um I I think a physical release, right? Like going on walks, going on runs. Um, I participated in something called the Fight for Air climb, right? Like but the commonality is, and there's even more tools actually. Like I teach something called the emotional sobriety process, where we really sit with our thoughts and our feelings, and it's almost like self-parenting in some ways. Um, where all of these things, what they have in common is a sense of like, hey, this is all going some. It just needs to move. And maybe we don't have, some of us, we need to think hard about it, depending on what it is. Um, and some of us, it just needs to move and we don't need to overthink, right? We can just be like, all right, I'm going on a run. I'll feel better when I'm done. And for others, it's okay, I need to sit down, I need to journal about this. I need to like find the solution. Um, but yeah, I think that's the commonality, letting it move. And I think different tools for different times in our life, different tools for different situations, different processes. And that's why I like to say all the time, like there's no one size fits all. And if anybody's preaching to you that there is, well, be cautious. Be cautious because nobody knows you like you do.
There's a mic drop moment that will be in the teasers right there.
Love it.
I'm glad I just kept my mouth shut for a second. It's like, because if that's what they're doing, it's called a cult.
Yeah,
And
yep. Yeah.
now,
Well, it's funny because speaking of which, like one of the perspectives that I heard is that most of our trouble, if we're spiritual in nature, so this is for your spiritual listeners, but when we find ourselves struggling, it's usually because we are trying to make ourselves a higher power or God, whatever we want to use, the universe. Um, or we're making someone else that power greater than ourselves. And so, and neither us nor other humans are capable of taking on the weight of the world, that size of a burden. And so, um, I don't remember what my through line was there, but I think that's a really powerful spiritual sentiment and concept. It's like, wait, I can't possibly have control all the time because if I try to, I'm going to go insane. And for me to give over my power and control to someone else, that's going to drive me insane too. Um, yeah.
mic drop moment number 7 of the whole conversation. Well, I bring up the spirituality stuff as somebody who definitely struggled with his journey back to a semblance of a connection to something bigger than himself. There was a surrender, and I think of that more as the art of self-discovery there. And that's why I think what you're bringing to the table here is so important. We can lose such a faith in something bigger than ourselves when life throws us a shit sandwich. And it's sometimes not just one shit sandwich, it's a lot stacked up, and that could be over years or decades. And there's very hard to see the light. Again, inevitably, like I've said before, those people who come through that tend to come out and have something very profound to give to the world. And they tend to be very interesting people because of it. But call it divine intervention, or call it whatever, but like pouring that energy into something, and as you said, letting go of that weight of the world. It's I see it time and again. That person also, and I felt that way too, is that you feel like you're trying to save everybody, trying to drag them across the finish line with that kind of thing. Or as you said, you're giving your power over to somebody else because it feels like it's too, like a human, but no one human can do that. You're creating a very unhealthy relationship, but you put it more into kind of the surrender to a process and something bigger than you.
Mm-hmm.
It's quite fascinating how things seem to work out a lot with that. And again, I tend to be a fairly spiritual dude, and one of the very tenets I speak about is spiritual fitness. So I love that you tapped into it. For the record, many people who listen to this are quite spiritual in nature. So good read on that one. I wasn't really too surprised when you did that, but good read. Good read.
Yeah.
Tell me a little bit about this what'd you say it? Emotional sobriety? What was that? Did I
Oh
hear it
yeah.
correctly?
Mm-hmm.
Tell
Yeah.
me about that technique. And I say that because I've been talking about the way I've been saying is like people are just numbing out on name their vehicle, booze, sex, video games, doom scrolling their Instagram, whatever it is.
Mm-hmm.
I think that when you brought that up, I think that sobriety element, I thought that's very interesting around that. I'd love to hear more about it.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that term originated in some of the 12 step rooms, if I'm not mistaken. I'd have to figure out exactly where it originated, but emotional sobriety, the way that I understand it, is about really paying attention to your thoughts and feelings, to your emotions, right? Without trying to change them, like really bearing witness to them. I think so many of us, we have an uncomfortable feeling, myself included, right? This is part of my origin story in terms of my business and how I got here. We experience such uncomfortable emotions and feelings that the first thing we want to do is we want to do anything we can to get rid of them. And the truth is if we are usually when we're experiencing that state of suffering, we are in the lower part of the brain. We're in fight, flight, freeze, faint, or fawn. There's so many options for us to go into survival mode. And we're not making the best decision. We're not taking the best action. Um, we're in reactive mode. We're in survival mode. It's like putting a band-aid on a hole in a boat. You know, okay, you might stop it for, I don't know, 3 seconds, but eventually the water is going to get the adhesive, the absorption is going to be absorbed. You're like, it's going to be leaking again. And so emotional sobriety is to say, okay, I'm feeling uncomfortable or I'm feeling ecstatic. I'm feeling whatever it is, and to be with it. And I teach clients how to be with it, whether, and that sort of goes with that release thing that we were talking about. Um, One of the ways that I teach folks through I kind of renamed it the emotional sobriety process, but what it is it's using the foundations of safe conversations with ourselves instead of with another person. And so let's say, I'll give a silly example. Let's say I'm hungry right now, and my thoughts are like, oh my God, I'm so hungry. I'm so hungry. I'm so hungry. And I laugh because there's an empty plate of food I just ate here. So that's not true. But anyway, so let's say I'm hungry. And those are the thoughts. Then one way to be emotionally sober is to say, okay, I'm going to mirror myself. So that's the first step. Okay, what I'm hearing myself think is that I'm really hungry right now. Okay, so we're repeating the thought, but we're acknowledging it, right? So what I'm hearing myself think is that I'm really hungry right now. Then we're going to validate it, right? So, okay, that makes sense that I'm hungry. And you might say why it makes sense, right? And that makes sense because I haven't eaten since this morning and it's been 6 hours. So that checks out, right? So we mirror, then we validate. Then we empathize, right? Okay, so what I'm feeling is, right? Or what I think I'm feeling is, because sometimes we don't even know. It's hard to parse out what we're feeling, right? So I imagine I'm feeling low energy. I imagine I'm feeling hangry. I imagine I'm feeling frustrated. And we might close that out with a that makes sense, and that's okay. Right. And so that's a way for us to, I'm just going to keep tying it back to psychological safety, but for us to create some psychological safety for ourselves. Notice I didn't change anything. I wasn't saying, oh, I'm hungry. Oh, I'm going to go get something to eat. Right. I'm sitting with the whole process. And what's really wonderful about sitting with that whole process is I'm like, oh, yeah, okay. I haven't eaten a full breakfast since 6 this morning. Okay. And it's, I don't know, 2 in the afternoon. Maybe I could use a meal, right? Whereas maybe instinctively, if we hadn't sat down and created some emotional sobriety, we would have grabbed for I don't know, an ice cream sandwich, a quick, unhealthy snack. The decision making would have been much more impulsive, is what I'm getting at. Maybe you would have grabbed a salad. I want to be one of those impulsive salad eaters, but I'm not, right? And so we get that opportunity to go through, to slow down a bit, to hold space for ourselves, and to accept ourselves in our current experience.
I love that. And kind of summarizing what I'm hearing in that is you're moving from impulsive reaction to an intentional response by simply putting a process, but essentially a gap
Mm-hmm.
between the emotion and then what you're going to do with it.
Yeah.
Whereas most people just scream right through it. And I can attest the same thing. Like a friend of mine, she maybe was it her? Doesn't matter. It's always like I've never witnessed anybody crush like a head of lettuce when they were really cranky. Yeah, it's like nobody went and did that. Let's be real. That would be more power to you, but it's not the same satisfying emotional satiety kind of problem within that. I really like that step by step thing to inevitably, I think even just doing that, you can separate an actual thing, such as, oh, yeah, I am hungry. I am experiencing hunger. This is a normal thing. This is okay. It's about that time. Or you might realize, actually, I'm a little cranky. This, whatever, project on my computer right now is I want to put my head through a wall. I want to just self-soothe with the most convenient thing. And maybe their weakness, quote unquote weakness, is ice cream sandwiches, which that's very close to my weakness. You will never see me turn down ice cream. That is
Yeah.
surefire way to be on my good side there.
Yeah. Let me tell you, M&M ice cream sandwiches. Mm. But I will say, the unicorns do exist. I have a friend, shout out to Julia. I think she'll appreciate the shout out. Who her go-to is healthy food, and you're hungry, you're craving almonds right now? What? Who are you? How are you raised? But they are out there, and I appreciate their ability to give themselves nutrients.
As you were sharing all of that, the thought that came to mind, especially with a company, what I was appreciating about the name of your company is stress less, which inevitably I think of like stress only as much as necessary. There's like people want to be like, I'm just too stressed. I don't want to experience stress. I think a lot of people get down this path thinking that there's going to be some cure all and I'm never going to feel pain. I'm never going to be emotionally out of whack or whatever. More you're allowing people to just learn how to cope with these things. I think people think that there's going to be some magical, I just don't feel this way ever again, which is simply not true. But I like here, not only are you changing the habits by what they do, but they're actually changing the relationship that they actually have with stress in the first place. Go
Yeah.
figure. Psychological safety, emotional safety, relational safety. Then of
Yeah.
course it's going to be expressed in others. I
Yeah.
think that I just wanted to bring that up because I think that that's just another way of people trying to avoid it. Why wouldn't that? I just don't want to feel these things, as opposed to actually you do got to experience it. You do need to feel it. You do need to come to terms with it in a way that you actually understand it. Because when you understand it, as you just said, you can make a better decision. Is it
Yeah.
always perfect? No, but I think that was important for people to hear because it's logical and it's real. I think it's also just a very human way to look at it as opposed to I'm going to find a way to just never experience anything, which inevitably you'd have to just stop living to not feel anything ever or be a robot.
Yeah. I mean, feelings are a part of life. Um, they fluctuate, they create variety. And that, one of the terms I've heard before is that we all have an emotional guidance system. Just like when we put our hands on a hot stove and we feel pain, right? It's telling us something. Our emotions are telling us something as well. And there's a variety of messages that we could receive. Just like with the stove, right? Like, oh, I need to put on an oven. I should turn the oven off. Oh, I should just not touch the oven. Like we can interpret it a million different ways, but there we all have a guidance system. And the boiling down is right now I don't feel safe. Why? One of the questions that I have my clients answer when we go through a block inventory, identify the ways in which they sort of self-sabotage. One of the questions I have them answer as part of this really thorough inventory is based on the situation you've brought to the table. What are the ways in which you've created unnecessary suffering for yourself or for others? And so many times, myself, I'm shocked at my answers, but also my clients are shocked at the answer because we realize that this thing that we felt so powerless over, we had a lot more to do with it than we realized. And so when we're looking at the stress less company, right? By the way, it's not stress less one word, not stress free. There's a space. Stress less company. We're looking at, yeah, what are the ways in which we've created unnecessary suffering or struggle for ourselves or for others? And okay, based on that answer, what is it that we are empowered to begin doing differently?
That last statement right there really hit the empowerment element. And again, what I really loved hearing there is that essentially you allowed somebody to take responsibility for themselves. Yeah, I
Mhm.
had a part in this too,
Mhm.
where I think that goes hand in hand with what we were talking about beforehand, offloading that to somebody else or somebody else's what were we saying? You know, this is the one size fits all program is going to solve it. We're going to promise you the world is going to be everything, and as opposed to the contextual approach we're talking about. The only way to get to a contextual approach, as much like you just said, you empower them by giving them responsibility over the emotions, over the circumstances, how they choose to respond, which is, I mean, that's hard. That's not easy to say.
This is the real work, guys. This is the real work.
This is the real right now.
Yeah.
Did you ever struggle like putting it back on them? I know I struggled in the past because I would definitely early, especially early in my career when I was still grappling with external. I mean, it always comes up at some point because new levels, new devils, that kind of concept. The playing shifting from a savior role into a leader role, I know it was very difficult for me to even start opening the door in my head to that concept. Is that something you ever struggle with or grapple with? And more selfishly for me now to kind of know.
Yeah, no, for sure. For sure. When I first started my business and even before, I think we've all said it. I just want to help people. I just want to help people, right? Like that's great. Um, if the people want to be helped, it's great. It's great. Um, and when I first started my business, there was a piece of my self-worth tied to um whether a client enrolled, right? So AKA saw the value that I provided enough to invest. But also in the results that they were getting. And I learned very quickly that you get what you put in, right? And so, part of my agreements now say that, hey, you here's your responsibilities. Like if you miss a call, you're not going to get results from that call because you're not there, right? I'm simply here to give you the bird's eye view, to show you the tactical tools and skills that have helped me and those that have come before you, let's say, to navigate this with relative ease. But at the end of the day, this is something that you have to work. And so actually it's been really freeing. Thank goodness I've spent most of my years in business now detached from the outcome in that sense, because the more attached I am, the more resistant I find. I don't know about you, but the more attached I am to a client's outcome or to even a friend's outcome, the more they're like, get away. Like, I don't want to do, the more resistant they get to whatever help I'm trying to provide. And so one of the things I keep saying I'm going to make t-shirts. Maybe I don't know. I say I'm finally going to do it every time, but there's a quote. I don't know where I heard it, but it's so good. I'll have to check the copyrights on it, but it says unsolicited advice is criticism. Right? And so I do my best to with if I probably have a lot of opinions about whatever it is. You could be like, what do you think of this bouquet of flowers? I have like 15 talking points about that bouquet of flowers, but bouquet. But did the person who put it together ask me what I thought? Probably not. So I try my best to wait until the invitation is made. Hey, what do you think about this? Because yeah, unsolicited advice is criticism. And so I wait until the invitation is made because, well, that's what creates psychological safety. But that's really when the person is ready, willing, and open to make a change, to do the work. There's my tangent.
Great tangent. Love the tangent. I appreciate what you said about the expectations. The more I go down this path with coaching, you see that a lot of it is really just expectation management.
Mm-hmm.
And what you said, the more I am attached to the outcome, the more the irony of it is that you get less of that outcome.
Mm-hmm.
What you resist persists. That it seems somewhere stuck in that paradigm there. I think that goes for professional or personal in any regard. But man, especially when I heard you say that, I mean, I know for me, and we had a nice joke at a session this morning. It was a couple clients we had a nice laugh together about it. That I love to be right, and perhaps you like to be
Mm,
right too. I think that's everybody's favorite words in the world are hearing the words said to you, "You were right."
very
So
validating.
very validating. I love it. I'm not gonna lie. My wife and I, we have a big whole thing about that. And this, I'm like, what we have to say the words. If we were right, you got to say those things out loud. It's like needles sticking to us when we we got to admit the other way around. But that being said, I appreciated what you're talking about the invitation. And I know that that was something I'm always just curious about somebody else's path of that. So I like hearing the way you verbalized it. The invitation was essentially saying, hey, I'm ready to receive your insight. I'm ready to receive
Mm-hmm.
criticism, but because otherwise it's going to fall on deaf ears. And in fact, it might even make it worse. It might even push them further away from what you were hoping to help. Though it was coming from a good place, you wanted them to get better, it actually pushed them farther away because we didn't have the patience to wait for that. And that's so uncomfortable. And you feel like, hey, I got the tools. I have, especially in like an intimate relationship, I know with my wife, I love to be right. Why didn't you listen to? I've been paying attention, baby. I'm watching. I'm seeing all the stuff. I promise. I want you to win. When you're happy, I'm happier. But talk to somebody down like some other friend. She hears that like that you did. I heard this thing, and I just gotta be like, that's awesome. I'm really happy that you learned that today. I haven't been saying that for the past 7 weeks, but whatever. You got this, girl. Yeah, that's so wise of them. You got to play it up a little bit, but mostly maybe I'm just griping for all the husbands out there. So I got you, fellas.
For the
Listen,
husbands, unsolicited advice is criticism. All right. Okay. We love you. We love you. Here's the thing. Here's the thing. Okay, we can say men and women's minds or brains are wired differently. There's many ways that they are, but even men, for them, I'm broad brushstroking. Put me in my place if I need to be. I will say this: we need to be listened to We need to be validated. We need to be empathized with. It's not, for the most part, it's not that we don't know what our next step is. It's it's often that we just need some validation and support and having the courage to take that next step. So it may be like that for the husbands listening, that they don't have their wives don't have the next and they may not have the skill or the tool that you have in your back pocket for her. But I can guarantee you if she doesn't know, she knows that her next step is to ask someone what she needs to do. And this goes for everyone, not just wives and husbands, the whole nine, right? Most of us, we just want to be heard, to be seen, to be witnessed, and to be affirmed in whatever next step we've decided within ourselves we need to do, or affirmed in our lack of next step that we've decided for ourselves.
For the record, about 80%. For the first time ever, I looked at the stats on this podcast because I don't really actually know how to look at most things. My friend have to mostly show me stuff, and then I go, cool. And I go right back to doing the thing I'm doing. I found it somewhere in Spotify. 80% of my listenership is women. So
send it to your husband. I'm just
send it
kidding.
to
Don't do it. Don't do it. That's
it.
unsolicited advice. It's unsolicited advice. Don't do it.
It's going to make them
just
feel
joking.
better, though. They got the male perspective. We got the husband perspective of the other side. We got both sides. So this was a fair argument. And I did the griping first. One of the most powerful books I ever read was Men Are From Mars, Women Are From Venus.
Oh, yeah, I never read it.
Okay, well, I'm going to give you a brief synopsis of things that I took out of it from right now. Number one, men were fixers.
Mm-hmm.
We want to be the knight in shining armor. Ladies, once you understand that we want to be the knight in shining armor, let us win. Like, we want this, and we're going to make it very primal for you. We want to get laid. That's really what it comes down to. We're usually food and sex. We're pretty primal. If we get those things, we're pretty happy. But definitely the sex more than anything. If we're the knight in shining armor, we think we did a good job. We think we're going to get the candy. Okay. Mm-hmm. If not properly understood, we start going into fix it mode because we want to be thorough. We want to help you. We want to do a good job because, pat on the head afterwards is fun. And then I learned the other side of that. Women often it's not so much about solving the problem. I just want to be heard. I need to just just talk the words out. So there's two parts to this right now, which is fun. I'll first start with another interesting revelation I had throughout this book. I had an ex-girlfriend read this, and she read that, and she's like halfway through the first half of the book. She goes, "This is clearly written." She looks at the back. Of course, it's written by a fucking dude. Like, of course it is.
I already knew the author was a male. Yep. Mm-hmm. I
did
know that.
First half of the book, you read in this thing, and it's definitely massaging the male ego. Where like you'll read. So I learned in that women are also way more patient because she got to the second half and then it turns and it starts to be like, oh, here's the other side. If it's just knowing when and where and how we got to land certain things. And I've also learned that in life that it's a thing. With that, let me provide a very tactical tool that has worked in my marriage with my wife. Because I learned my wife would come home. There's this one part where she just kind of went on a really stressful bit of time. And she would come home and just words would fall out of her head. And she's giving me all the bits of information, give me very poor economy of words in all of this. I'm getting the long thing. And I'm just like, too much for me. I need to start solving problems in my head. And I would start giving unsolicited advice. So yes, I failed.
We've all fallen victim to it, by the way.
We all
just
have.
So you know.
Women
too. We love to do it too.
I'm putting myself on the chopping block first. So you know what? Here it is. This me laying myself down at the sword, right?
Vulnerability. It's the theme.
It's Naked Sunday, baby. It's all about being vulnerable. This hack worked great. I had to tell my wife, honey, you need to clarify for me before you go on this rant.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
Is solving the problem me just sitting here and listening to it straight through? And if you say that, I can shut down that part of my brain and realize the only task to win right now is to do this thing. Like you gave me the role and how to do it, and I can do that.
Oh,
It's
I love that.
worked like gangbusters. It's
That's such a
really helped.
great male perspective shift to cater to the way the man's mind is wired too, because it's saying, instead of saying, I just need you to listen, it's saying, you can solve this problem for me by listening. Like you are fixing it by listening. And so it's adding that, just that, like, okay, this is your need and this is my need, and this is how we're both going to come together to have our needs be met. I love that. I love that.
Try it on. Try it on for size. It's helps so much. Obviously, when my wife goes a little too off the rail, she's pregnant right now, so like all and end of the year with school, things are really on a tilt right now. And as I'm supporting her, and I'm learning how to be an even better husband at this moment in my life. But by and large, that simple thing has been incredibly valuable in at least subduing problem solver side of my brain, because that's on overdrive all the time. I just love doing that in
Yeah.
general with everybody, and that's like the job. But anyway, tools.
Yeah. You're reminding me of something I've seen. I've seen a variety of different versions of it, but when you're sharing or receiving something, you can ask similarly, like, do you want to be hugged? Do you want to be heard? Um, do you want advice? It was like H's. I can't remember them all, but it was like hugged, heard, advice, like fix it basically. Or, and then the last one I saw was a reel making fun of that. And it was like, or do you want me to get angry on your behalf? And the wife chose angry on her behalf. And it was great. It was like, I can't believe it. Could you believe, like, but we get asked, like, set the expectations going into the conversation. Like, do you just need to be listened to? Do you want advice? Do you want me to fix it? Do you actually not want to say anything and just like be hugged? Or do you, the last joke, do you want me to get angry on your behalf and just gossip or bitch, whatever that
I
looks
think
like.
I'm going to use that with my wife next time. Like, you just need
Yeah.
me to get really angry for you. I got this. Even though
Yeah.
I try not to get too elevated into anger anymore. My wife just
Yeah.
walked in. She's rolling her eyes at me right now. So I know that I really struck a chord there too. Crushing it right now. I'm crushing it with it. Love it.
Confirmation, confirmation.
Yeah. I wish he was here 2 minutes ago when I shared the whole bit about how we had to negotiate. Tell me how to solve a problem here. Give me the tools. Give me the tools for the
Yep.
toolbox right
Yeah.
now. Let's do this.
It was divine timing. She needed to hear exactly what you were saying at this exact moment. It'll
It
spark a
was.
conversation later. You'll be good to go.
Oh, there will be a debrief around that. Right? Right, honey? This is a podcast. Love you. There we go. Still, and so we just keep rolling. See, this is truly Naked Sunday. Somebody asked me once, this is just an aside, just for fun. People ask me a lot about like, hey, how do you do this podcast thing? Because so many people are like, I have this idea, and I'm like, they're thinking like I need to have all this equipment, all this, other this, that, and the other thing. And I'm like, no, on purpose, I do this and I don't have all this extra crazy. Like, I'm cool with it. Somebody walks in, cool, there's noise. Before our dog passed, he would be barking in the background. Like, it is what it is. You know what? Here, I'll bring my dog up into the frame. People would listen. People, mind you, people would start asking more about my dog than to ask about me. I was like, okay, I know where I stand in this hierarchy of life. Like, good on that.
Fur babies always win. They
Fur
always
babies
win.
always win every single time. But that's my long-winded way of saying, like, people, guess what? And people, and what I have learned, the more people have talked to me about it and I've shared what they're like, I like the fact that, yeah, like, you're like, fuck it, I don't care. Like, this is you living your life. You happen to be talking to a friend right now. It's as if you're sitting in our house and we're just talking, and then somebody comes in and you have a little, oh, cool. And then we're right back to the thing we're doing. And then, like, people get way too serious about certain business things and certain other things. We're in a day and age where what are we looking for? We're looking for authenticity. This is how I live
Yeah.
my life. I don't care. Let's have some
Yeah.
fun.
I had a mentor who, I mean, still my mentor, who says all the time, he says, the definition of enlightenment is to lighten up.
Ooh, let's go.
So good, right? And yeah, I'm like, wow, yeah, just let it go. Just life doesn't have to be so serious. Like, enjoy, have a laugh, have a good time.
Just
Definition of
like we
enlightenment is to lighten up.
just like we started the episode. Got to laugh a little bit.
Yeah.
Let's pivot to fun questions.
All right,
So
let's
here we
go.
go. 3 fun questions. Question number 1. What sports or creative activities did you do when you were younger, and how did you play them?
The second part of that question has me confused, but probably because I didn't play sport. Well, okay, let me answer the question. I
Cool.
grew up dancing, took a bunch of dance classes. And then when I got to high school, I did cross country, track, track and field. And that was basically my shtick. I will say that in my senior year of high school, fun fact about me, I threw shot put all through high school.
Hmm.
5'3", not your typical shot put gal, but I did place 12th in the state of Maryland, so I'm quite pleased with myself about that. Yeah, hair flip.
Damn, girl. Yeah.
How did I play? I don't know how to answer that, but
So when I talk about style of play, it could also be what type of so I played a lot of team sports. In fact, I only played team sports, but I tended to be somebody who played both sides of the ball. I tended to be in captain, like be the captain on teams, leadership roles, things of that nature. Like those were my styles of how I played and how I went about it. It tended to be more like
mm,
the type of like leading on the field concepts, more intellectual player. That used to be how I approached it.
interesting.
Some people are, and that was like I could play any of the positions. I could be more util. I could understand all the things going. Some people are like, I play one sport thing. You've talked about painting and all those type of things. Like, what's your style?
God knows. Well, if you look for the themes, right? Like I did I made art, I danced, I did track and field cross country. There's this sense of community, but there's this individualism within the community. So I don't know what this says about me or not, but we're all on the same team, but we also have our own silos in which we're responsible for our own piece of the puzzle, which I appreciate.
Fire response. And you're gonna know why I really like that response now, because I'm
Uh-oh.
telling you what inspired this question.
Okay.
So in college, I studied kinesiology, concentration and fitness development. One of the classes I took was on play. I kind of poo-pooed it at the time, but as I've gone beyond it, the importance it talked about with play was how we play often tells us a lot about how we are, because play is a creative activity. So sports, painting, whatever the thing is, but your response there, go figure, it still continues to be a theme with you and how
Hmm.
you're engaging people. You have your own, you've already talked about your own styles and you have your own seasons, sports seasons, your own seasons of maybe it's movement, maybe it's all of that. So I
Yeah.
always find that really fun because in a strange way, we've always been who we are, and play and sport. Obviously, I like fitness and athletic and that kind of stuff, but that's been the through line, as you did. You went looking for the through line right away, and I thought that was really cool. So
Thanks. I have to get this off of my tongue for a moment. Anytime someone asks me about sports, I think of an old friend of mine who always says, "Oh, I don't know anything about sports ball," or she's like, "Oh, I don't watch sports ball." Um, so you made me think about that because none of my sports involved balls. So footballs, basketballs, yeah, we're just let it slide. Just let it slide.
let it slide. It's Naked Sunday. We're good. We're good. Again, beautiful response. That was fantastic. Question number 2.
All right.
You're stranded on a desert island. You can bring one movie and one TV show with you. So, what is your desert island movie and TV show, and why?
My brain wants to say Castaway, but I just feel like that would be torture, just absolute torture. But actually, you know what? We're gonna go with Castaway because I'll feel like we're relating, you know. Um, Castaway, yes, it'll be like therapeutic and torturous at the same time. And then, um, because I love Mean Girls, and there's a few movies that I really like, but I don't think I could watch them like over and over and over again without like screaming at the TV. Um, in this hypothetical of there's electricity, but nothing else on this deserted island. Um, the TV show that I would bring with me, I feel like I'm gonna get some hate for this, but I would take The Big Bang Theory. I would do The Big Bang Theory. It's so good. Fun fact about The Big Bang Theory is that if you, so I find it like super relaxing, calming, it's predictable. It's like a really good like self-care activity for me at the end of the day. And I find it quite funny. Take the laugh track off The Big Bang Theory. And I believe they record live, so it's a live audience laugh track. But take that laugh track off. Oh my gosh, not at all safe conversations, not at all psychological safety. These friends are really mean to one another, but yet I really like it as a show. So maybe I'll do a series for the social media about psychological safety in the Big Bang Theory.
So two really awesome things. I think entertainment also tells a lot about how we engage with like what do we care about? What do we want to
Yeah.
engage with? Castaway, you just talked about relatability. Everything about this was about psychological safety. Coaching is about empathizing and being in that space together. So I thought that was really cool. I enjoyed the Big Bang Theory. My wife and I, we watch Big Bang Theory every single night when we go to bed. We've watched the thing through. I've probably seen it, I don't know, 13 times through every season, which there's what,
There's a lot
12,
of
14
yeah.
seasons with 20 some odd episodes per. As you said, it's light, laughter, it's whatever. You are right. It's pretty naughty with certain things like that. There's a lot of like, it's not PC by any stretch of the imagination when you really pay
You
attention to it.
I'm telling you, go to YouTube, Google Big Bang Theory without the laugh track. The things they say to each other, they're mean. They're
Yeah.
really mean, and yet somehow I don't know. It's like it's also thinking about like the Notebook and how Noah and Allie are totally a toxic codependent relationship, but we'll get into that another day.
Well, so you're funny. So Big Bang Theory, though, I have witnessed some actually very powerful lessons through that in
Uh-oh, let's go.
relationships. So a lot of my work is about learning how to surrender, especially like I end up mostly coaching a lot of marriages about surrendering, especially I work with a lot of women, surrendering into your partner because you don't feel psychologically safe to finally open up that part of your heart again. You've been hurt, you've been whatever, you're the rock for fucking everybody. And you're worried if you make yourself the priority and you let this side of you out, you're going to be rejected and you're going to lose all of your things. Especially if they have a business as well. And a lot of people think if I'm vulnerable, if I'm myself, if I'm authentic, if I make something other than the business the priority, it's all going to come collapsing down. I don't know if you know this episode. This is one of the many episode things I've thought about. There's the
I'm
relationship
gonna
agreement stuff, whatever, but there's two episodes that I think about with this singular paradigm. There's the episode where Penny and Sheldon, they go to the psychic. And I don't think many people have picked this part out, but here it is. The psychic says, you have this woman in your life. It's Amy. And she says, and he is in the throes of trying to figure out his next career direction.
mm.
He says, if you give yourself over to her, she says, you give yourself over to her, all your problems will be solved, essentially. I'm paraphrasing a lot of this. Jump ahead to their wedding when he's finally fully surrendering himself to her. That day, he has this massive breakthrough in their research. They finally, whatever, it's super
Is
so
this like
sim.
toward the end of the show where like
The psychic one, it's many episodes before that. It's
oh
like it's
yeah.
almost like I think it might be almost a season before the wedding. So it's very interesting that, and I picked that out and I told my wife, I don't know if many people have noticed that, but I paid attention to that one. I don't know what, I might have had a drink. I might have been a little high. I'm not sure. Whatever. I'm not exactly 100% sure. I had a moment. I was watching it and it was probably my second or third time through and I saw it and I go, huh. And then it's like, oh, because I'd already seen the show through. I go, oh. on this day when he's finally fully in commitment, because I had always many times said, I never thought I was going to have any intimate relationship in my life, let alone
Mm.
with you. The day he finally was committing to this, that was not about just the work. He was always like, but it's the work. And he had even had a couple episodes where he drove himself fully insane trying to only immerse himself in the work, which speaks to this concept of how
Yeah,
you have to.
with that one girl who was like also pushing him to was that temporary girlfriend. Yeah.
Yep.
Yep.
Where people are not thinking about this other side of themselves. They think that nurturing a relationship makes them weak, at least in their profession and their external pursuits. But here in this moment, what I thought was beautiful about it was that it opened up this other side. It actually gave him, by getting the space from the work, he actually saw the work for what it was and he had the big breakthrough. So
Yeah.
anyway, there's one of my many lessons.
You're reminding me of this. I want to say it's vulgar. I don't know if it is or not. This story, I don't know if you've heard about it, about this, like, I'm gonna butcher it. It's like a monk who's meditating on this mantra like day in and day out for like years. And he's like, it's like a riddle of a mantra. He's supposed to like figure it out. And he's meditating on it, meditating on it, meditating on it, can't figure it out, can't figure it out, can't figure it out. And he's living a life of like solitude within the I don't know what in the headquarters of the monks. I don't know what they're called. Monastery. Um and part of his journey is celibacy and like all of this. And finally he's like he's meditated, can't figure out this riddle. He gets frustrated. He's like, you know what, this is just not going to work for me. I don't even know if I'm meant to be a monk. He goes out, he has sex, and during having sex, I think, or I don't know if it's during or after the orgasm, doesn't matter, he goes, sir, and I'm like, what is this? I don't know where this like fable or telltale came from, but it was like exactly the similar concept of like he finally just surrendered, trying to figure it out and let it happen. Um, Sort of a vulgar, perhaps, example, but it's a you. I'll have to Google it later. I got to figure out where it came from. But I heard that I was like, yeah, you let go, you surrender, you get off the subject for a while, and things will work themselves out the way that they're meant to.
Who would have thought Big Bang Theory got us existential today, right?
Yeah, talking about monks and
Monks
yeah.
having sex and Big Bang Theory giving, ethereal
Through lines, you're
breakthroughs.
blowing people's mind right now with the Big Bang Theory connection. I'm thinking about Castaway while also being cast away, and like there's just so many levels happening right now.
This leads us into then our third and final question. What is your deathbed meal? Who are you sharing it with and why?
I'm gonna trust the immediate answers that come to mind. Macaroni and cheese, which is hilarious. I'm lactose intolerant, so
It doesn't matter. Deathbed meal, girl. We'll be all right. Out with
mac
a
and cheese,
bang.
nothing else, just mac and cheese. Actually, in my mind, it's a vision of a plate with a big hunk of mac and cheese, but there's room for something else. So whatever's available, I'm open to it. Um, who would I share it with? Well, I think I would share it with my closest, like my family. Like I'm thinking, it's funny, I'm thinking about my mom. She makes great mac and cheese, but that's not the mac and cheese I want. So I hope she's okay with with that. Not her mac and cheese. Yeah, I think I would connect with my nuclear family, my partner, yeah, the people that are closest to me, and just have a good time. As long as I'm in good health and this is just, one of those flukes.
Here's some fun one. So I'll start with the actual meal. Usually I don't dive too much into the actual meal you've chosen, but I thought this one was fitting. With everything we talked about, addressing the stress, you just, especially since you're lactose intolerant, here you are, you want a big plate of mac and cheese, the thing that is going to give you the discomfort, but you're going to confront it. Here you are, like, very on brand, girl. With what you said, there's going to be some space on the side, and I'm going to just leave it open to whatever comes, whatever is there. I'm open to it. I thought that
Mm-hmm.
was very cool because it's, again, very on brand. with this
Yeah.
concept of how you're living your life, confronting the
Mm.
uncomfortable in front of you with leaving space to grow and experience something new. Quite prophetic.
Yeah.
We'll go into the more practical side of it. Of course, you did have some association with home cooked meals. I ask this because I do believe, I love the way you answered, but I do believe that world peace is going to be solved one family dinner at a time.
Mm. Hmm.
The deeper and final reason to this, though, is that I wrote a speech a few years ago at my when I officiated my youngest brother's wedding, and the speech is titled "The Window and the Mirror." General premise, especially in coaching, the eyes are the windows to the soul, but what if there's something more? And when we look at people, the old saying is, when you look into their eyes, you see their soul. But what if it's actually showing you what's inside of you, what you're capable of? As many
Hmm.
people are your mirror, but we don't often let that be. Well, I think this is a beautiful thing here at the end of our life. If we should be able to choose that, those people that are there are going to be a representation of the furthest growth we've had in our life. They're the epitome of our highest pursuit of our greatest self. I think there's something really beautiful about those things,
Mm.
especially for choosing the family, because we can choose. We ultimately can choose who we want to share the journey with as much as possible, of course. So I think that
Mm.
was really cool to hear your response within all of that.
Thank you.
So to
Yeah.
funnel that, yeah, overarching all those things, and again, I don't know if you listen to any of these episodes, but those three questions are inspired by the way my father and I connected when I was younger. He worked a lot, but every 4 to 6 weeks, we'd have a boys' night. Go figure, I still have a boys' night every week, but he and I would have a boys' night. We'd go out. He'd take me to Sports Authority before they closed down. We had sports stuff, and we would maybe I'd get some sports things, whatever. We talk about life there and all that. We'd grab a bite to eat, and we'd catch a movie together. And
Mm.
that was my way of experiencing love and connection in that relationship. So it's my little way of kind of welcoming you in and sharing love with you and making you feel safe and
Mm.
appreciated. So,
I love it.
yeah.
Thank you. Thank you for sharing.
Well, you're very welcome. Not just surface level questions around here, as much as I tried to make them fun and light. Yeah. These icebreaker questions, when you really ask people great icebreaker questions, they actually can expose a lot about who they are and more than we
Yeah.
we might give them credit for. So looking at the time, I do want to be respectful of your time. We're about right on par with what I said it was going to be. If somebody's listening right now and they want to stress less, what's the best way for somebody to connect with you?
Yeah. So you can find me on social media at the Stress Less Co. That's the Stress Less Co. Otherwise, you can find us on our website, same thing, thestresslessco.com.
Beautiful. This has been fantastic. Had some good laughs, had a grand old time. Before we go, Carlee, what are your final words of wisdom that you'd like to leave our audience with today?
Hmm. This quote always stands out to me, so I'll share it. And I mentioned it in the episode, which is the opposite of depression is hope. So for any of your listeners who maybe feel a little under the weather, feeling like life's gotten a little hard, my invitation would be to find hope wherever you can, even if it's just the sunlight coming through the window. Thanks.
It's beautiful. I'm going to leave it on that. That was a phenomenal quote. Everybody, I'm going to be putting Carlee's connect stuff in the show notes. So go do that if you didn't feel like typing that down, even though it was pretty non-complicated. You can find it pretty simple. It will be there. There will be a link. Just push the button. You'll be fine. This is awesome. I'm excited for continuing to build this friendship. This is fantastic. You're fantastic. Who was it again? Was it Shelly that connected us?
Yeah,
Shout
Shelly.
out Shelly, another Shelly Connect that's come on the podcast. She's going to start getting like a tally. I'm gonna have a scoreboard of who's bringing people to the podcast later on. It's gonna be great. Carlee, you're awesome. Thanks so much for hanging today. Everybody, thank you for listening and sharing your time and your energy with us today. And until next time, I remind you to love everybody.